Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 23rd episode of Azure Community Live. We're having a afternoon session or lunch session, which is, well, we did it once before, I think, but it's quite new for us. So often we're doing this in the evening. Well, today we have guest Sarah. We were talking, we said, let's do a session during lunch so people can have lunch and learn while doing lunch. Everyone's working from home. So yeah, why not eat while learning stuff, and you actually don't have to eat alone in your home, and you can actually do it together with other people, although it's online because everything is online currently, right? Today we have our guest Sarah Lean from Scotland, a well-known speaker in the community of Azure. She just told me she did over almost 30 sessions this year, which is quite an achievement, I think, in this era where everything is online and there's not that many conferences. She will talk about successful data center migrations to Azure. So I'm really curious what she will teach us. So over to you, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. I'm quite jealous because you're talking about lunchtime, but it's not quite lunchtime here in Scotland. So my stomach is definitely starting to rumble.
Oh, yes, it's 11 o'clock at your place, right? So it's 12 here at noon.
So today I want to talk about migrations to Azure, and please feel free to drop any questions or comments in the chat, and we can address them during the session as well.
So for those that people from Australia in the chat, so it's not far from lunchtime for them, right?
Awesome. So for those that don't know me, a quick introduction. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft. I'm based in Scotland, and I've been in the IT industry for 15 odd years, and I'm firmly in the IT pro or IT infrastructure side of things. So I'm definitely not a developer, although I do find myself spending more and more time inside Visual Studio Code these days, and looking at PowerShell scripts and Bash scripts as well. I am massively involved in trying to encourage the next generation. So I'm a STEM ambassador here in Scotland, and I like to try and encourage the next generation into IT, because we definitely don't have enough people interested in coming along into the industry, and we definitely don't have enough females coming into the industry as well. So that's a massive focus for me as well. Now, as I said, I am from Scotland, and I always like to interject a little bit of Scotland into my presentations. So here's a picture of a lovely friendly Highland cow, or Highland coo, as we say in Scotland. But yeah, that's where I'm from, Scotland. So as I said, migrations are something that most people are thinking about or talking about, and there's lots of different triggers for those migrations. It could be that your data center lease is due to run out and you're looking to move somewhere else. It could be that you're at the end of your hardware or software life. So you invested 4 or 5 years ago, you're now struggling to get parts for some of those servers on eBay, and the operating systems are starting to get a bit cumbersome and not be able to provide what you need. So lots of different triggers for people moving to Azure or thinking about a data center migration. Obviously this year we've seen a lot of people think about migrating away from their on-prem data center, because no one is actually working in an on-prem or an office environment. Everybody's at home, so things have to change. However, regardless of what your migration trigger is, what industry you are, what size of data center you're thinking about migrating, there's really 4 key stages of that migration process that I talk about. And I think we all need to have a think about these 4 steps, again, regardless of size, industry, any of that kind of thing. Now, the thing that a lot of people get stuck on is they think a data center migration is purely technology, but it's absolutely not. It's a people and process and technology project that you have to work on. So it's not something you should be focusing fully on the technology. You should also be thinking about people in your IT department and the end user experience as well with this migration. Now, the first stage of your migration is going to be discovery. Now, your discovery is really that chicken and egg phase. Do we start to discover what we've got in our environment, or do we think about the migration strategy? I'm firmly in that camp of you have to do some discovery before you do that migration strategy. You need to understand what's in your environment. Now, I know a lot of us will have great documentation, hopefully, of our environment and be confident of what's in our environment, but I've seen lots of customers do a discovery and uncover something that they didn't realise was still switched on, wasn't there, or there's always those servers that are hiding under someone's desk in the corner of your data centre, or have been re-switched on, or have something inputted into them, a SQL database that's suddenly production and you've forgotten all about it, or someone sneaked it in without a change request. So you really have to do that deep dive discovery into understanding what's in your environment, understand the server, understand the dependencies that each of these servers and workloads rely on. Because let's face it, our servers aren't just siloed, or very rarely our servers are siloed and independent. There's often an interconnection between other servers, whether that be even just back to Active Directory for authentication. There's some kind of connectivity happening between your servers. So you need to understand how all of that fits together before you can start to think about, am I going IaaS? Am I going PaaS? Am I going SaaS? Am I leaving this workload on-prem? So you need to do that discovery. Now, your discovery shouldn't just be focused on the technology. Like I said, you should be starting to look outward as well from the technology. Start to talk to the stakeholders within your business. Start to interact with people within other departments. So speak to your HR department, speak to finance, speak to the manufacturing department, whoever may be within your environment, and start to speak to them about this move that you're proposing. Ask them things like, do they enjoy the software that they are using? Is it time for potentially a move to something else? Is there something else they've been looking at? I've been in situations where the IT department are often the last people to find out that HR have bought a new bit of software and are suddenly wanting to implement it, and we have to help them implement it. So it's a great time to start to talk to these people and re-engage with them if you haven't had those communication channels open before, and start to really understand how their experience is going to be impacted by this move away from the data center. And you can find out some critical information about when they need that software, as there times of the month, as there times of the year that they need that software, and it can't be down. It has to be up 365 days a year and 24 hours a day. Find out those kind of details. Again, don't assume that documentation from maybe 5 years ago is still relevant today. Also look inward into your IT department as well. Look at who within your IT department is skilled in using the cloud. If you're going down the Azure route, hopefully that's the route you're going down. Look at who has any skill sets for working within that environment as well. Lots of people are skilled on running Hyper-V environments, installing servers, looking at VMware or Hyper-V, those kinds of technologies. But are they skilled up in looking after Azure? Because it is slightly different. There's a lot of similarities, but there are also some differences that you need to think about. And the last thing you want to do is migrate all your workloads up into Azure and then find out nobody knows how to use the platform, and suddenly you're in a really sticky situation where you don't know what your environment's running on. So look at who in your IT department is skilled within Azure. If no one is skilled, then you need to stop and have a look at the training plan. You need to think about how you're going to move forward, because again, like the last thing I said you want to do is move all your workloads from a place where you're comfortable for and then end up in a place where it's not supported at all. Now, there are things like tooling that can help you. I'm absolutely not suggesting that you sit and manually log on to every server and look at what the kind of connections are happening, what software is installed, and doing all that manual collecting of the data. There are tools that can help you along the way. Now, this is also a key stage within your discovery part. You have to think about what's the right tool for your environment. Some people have full access to their environment. They have access to every server, they have the root passwords, they have access to the hypervisor level. Other people don't because of the way they host it. I've talked to a lot of customers who host their environment and they don't have access to the hypervisor level, and that will hamper them a little bit for doing the discovery, because a lot of the tools that are out there rely on being able to plug hypervisor level if you're looking at virtual machines. So again, this is where that discovery starts to think about, and you start to think about what you're doing. Azure Migrate is the native tool within Azure that allows you to assess and migrate your workloads up into Azure, but it might not work for everybody. So again, have a look at what's out there on the market and try them out. Some of the tools available are free to try. Azure Migrate is one of them. So again, it's a great way to dip your feet into the water of looking at the tool, them out, seeing if it works for your environment, see if it doesn't work for your environment, and then you have a good idea of what you're actually looking for from a tool to help you with this migration path as well. And also, when you're thinking about a tool, is do you want one that's just going to do the discovery, or do you want one that's going to continue on your journey as well? Do you want it to be able to do that discovery and migration piece as well, so you're not investing in and learning two different tools? There's also some tools that can help you already on the path. So there are some backup tools such as Commvault or Veeam that already have capabilities that can help you with that migration piece. They might not have the discovery capabilities for you, but again, have a look at what's available within your environment, within the community, and see what's the best tool for you, because it can make or break a migration project. I have seen people unfortunately invest in the completely wrong tool and have to start again, and it does nothing for their reputation, either as an IT department or the project timelines. Now, during the discovery phase, you should be thinking about cost as well. You should be thinking about costing your current environment and what you're going to be hosting within the. Now, costing your current environment is often a hard one for a lot of people, because lots of people have their data centers inside the office block where everybody else is working. And things like electricity costs or security costs for that building are wrapped up into the overall cost for the organisation, and you never get the breakdown about what it is within your data centre. And you never think about those things beyond that, because your building is secure and safe and has all the CCTV or security guards, and you don't have to think about those additional costs with your IT. You often just think of IT cost as the hardware that you're buying or the software that you're buying every 3 or 5 years. But you have to think about these, because when you're moving to Azure, those are costs that you're now starting to pay and starting to see across and included when you're buying services as well. And although you don't take care of some of those security measures, it is wrapped in the cost, and that's what Microsoft takes care of within the Azure environment. So trying to price up your existing environment and being able to compare that with what it looks like in the cloud is something that you have to think about. Otherwise, you could end up in a situation where you're comparing your existing costs, which aren't quite covering everything, to the Azure costs, and it looks horrendously more expensive because you haven't compared apples with apples. Now, we have a pricing tool that can help you along that way if you're struggling to try and find out the cost of your existing environment. So the total cost of ownership calculator can be used to help you on that journey. And we've taken information and averages from other customers and tried to guide you along that way. So you can put in some information. So you can say, I have 5 servers and some of them are Hyper-V or they're all physical servers. And we can start to help you provide some of that costing or an estimate towards that costing, so that you have something you can then compare your Azure cost to as well. Now that you've got all your discovery data and you've started to gather all of that, the next stage is the assessment stage. And that's a stage where you're going to have to start to strategize about your workloads and how you're going to move forward. And are you moving forward with this migration? So hopefully you've discovered all the right information about your workloads, and you know how everything's interconnected, and you know what's there, and you know the capabilities and the dependencies that each of those workloads have. So you can start to look at, am I moving this as an IaaS workload? So is it just going going to be a lift and shift to another VM hosted within Azure? Is there a place where I could actually re-architect it and put it into a platform as a service or PaaS or SaaS solution within Azure? Or am I even going to leave it on-prem because it's a brand new server. It was only bought 6 months ago. We still have hardware support on it. It's still on the latest and greatest operating system. We were gonna use that asset on-prem and just migrate it once the hardware or the warranty runs out. So these are the decisions that you hopefully have the right information to start to think about and being able to strategize properly as well. You also start to think about things beyond just the workloads. Start to think about backup and disaster recovery at this stage as well. What are your plans going forward? Can your existing backup and disaster recovery software or plans actually cover you? Probably not. You'll probably have to start to think about potentially using another tool to back up your Azure resources. You'll probably have to think about changing your disaster recovery plan. These are things that you have to think about. Although Azure has redundancy and tries to mitigate against any outages and stop that from happening or stop that impacting you, you still have to take care of backing up your data and thinking about what happens if there is an Azure outage and where I'm going to get my workloads running. So these are definitely things you have to think about at this stage. It's not just about migrating those workloads in silo from your on-prem environment up into the cloud. And again, it's also starting to think about the future plans as well about your workloads, starting to think about how you're decommissioning, how you're going to handle this. Is it going to be something that's happening at weekends? Can you migrate some workloads during the day because they're not impacting anybody if they're down, and stuff like that. So this is really the assessment stage where you're looking at all that data you've collected and you're looking about how the plans are going to be for this migration stage, or even if there is a migration that's going to happen. So the next stage, after you've done all that planning, you've sat down, you've got all the planning, you've got the approval from your leadership, and you're going to move forward, is starting to think about the migration, actually starting to get your hands on the keyboard and actually migrating your workloads up into Azure. And again, like I was saying earlier, you're now starting to think about IaaS, PaaS and SaaS, and there's no right or wrong answer about how you're moving forward. You've got to have a think about how you're doing these migration strategies and when you're going to be doing them. The last thing you should be planning is to move your most critical workload up into Azure first. You want to start with something that's minimal impact to your business, because if it's the first one you're moving and you're trying to just learn the process and trying to get some confidence around moving this workload or doing this migration process, the last thing you want to do is move, say, your payroll application up into Azure. Something goes wrong and your boss or the owner of the company is shouting at you. So definitely start off with something that's non-critical that you can learn off of, and then build up to your confidence to get to those mission critical workloads. Make sure you're keeping your communication open between your IT department, so your fellow colleagues, as well as the rest of the business about what's happening. The last thing that you want to happen as well is you do the migration maybe at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, you clock off, you finish, you go home, all successful of that migration. Something happens and your help desk get the call saying that something's down, unavailable, and they didn't realise that you'd actually migrated away from the cloud. They run into your data center, switch on the old server, and suddenly the old server comes back into life, and then you've got the situation where the old server is now running instead of the one in Azure, or there's more issues happening there. So again, make sure your communication plan is happening so that you can understand what's going to be what the process is. This is also the stage where you should start to be thinking about who's taking care of documentation, who's updating that documentation to make sure that people aren't powering on that old server in your data center. People know how to log a fault now. Previously it might have been solely up to you within the IT department. If something happened, you would know the suppliers, you had to phone, you would know the process. Again, it's different now that it's in Azure. You obviously don't have the ability to just run up to the data center and start to press some buttons and interact with the server. So how do you log a call? How do you deal with those kind of support questions? You need to make sure that you're communicating all of that as well. And please don't forget to clean up. If you've maybe staged a migration or taken an extra backup so that you have kind of redundancy if something was to go wrong during the migration. Make sure you're cleaning these kind of things up. You don't want the data being stored either on-prem or in the cloud, just for the sake of it. So make sure you're doing all those cleanup exercises and you're decommissioning things as you kind of go at the right and appropriate times. Now, the fourth stage, and arguably a stage that should probably be happening throughout your migration, is the secure and manage. And this is something that will become a business as usual activity around your new environment living within Azure. This is about keeping your processes and your documentation and everything up to date. So make sure, again, everybody knows the right things that are happening. Make sure your SLA documentation is up to date. Make sure people know how to log a fault. Thinking about staff training. So as I said, staff training is something that's really important. Long gone are the days where we send people on a training course and they go and they spend a week intensively learning about that product or about that service. They sit the exam and then they're qualified for the next 3 or 5 years because we don't change the operating system, we don't change the solution, nothing new is being added to it as static. Long gone are those days. Azure changes all the time, so make sure you have some kind of regular training plan set in place. It could just be as simple as saying that once a month, one of your staff members has not a day off, but a day where they go and learn training. You know, they sit and just do some hands-on training. They spend some time doing an exam, whatever it may be, in order to keep them fresh and up to date with what's happening within Azure and constantly thinking about how they can evolve the platform as well within your organization. Also think about cost management at this stage, and we all have to do a little bit of cost management now when we're working in the cloud. Because of the way that the cloud is built towards you, you're getting charged per minute, per hour, per day, depending on how that service is running. So you really do have to be mindful about optimizing your workloads. I know when I was looking after on-prem environments, I was always guilty of oversizing things in my environment so I wouldn't get calls from help desk. And I would, make sure that the optimum, it was there, the resources were there for those workloads to run. On the cloud, that's probably not a great solution because you're paying for that extra capacity that you've put in place. So make sure you're using things like Azure Cost Management and Azure Advisor to try and get those performance and sizing all right for the right workload that you have hosted within Azure. Now, cost management shouldn't be something that you focus on every week, every day. It should definitely not be one of those activities. I say to customers, try and do it maybe every quarter, every 3 months, every 6 months, depending on how your business operates. That way you've got a lot of data to base your decisions on. So if you're right-sizing something down or right-sizing something up the way, you've actually got a good amount of data and you're not just doing it because something happened on the Tuesday and you're now suddenly ramping that server or that workload up to another tier, and then you never use that full tier and you're paying for all that wasted space. You're actually basing that right sizing based on 3 or 4 months worth of data, and it's a proper amount of data you've got around it. Now, the migration projects are often stressful. They do take a long time. They're never going to happen over a weekend. They're definitely going to be a long-term investment. And as I said, they can be quite stressful on an IT team and an organisation. The thing to think about is these migration projects are never linear. There's always going to be something that gets in the way and make you pivot your strategy and think about something differently. You might find a new resource or a new workload on-prem that you suddenly have to think about and add into your plan. There might be a budget change halfway through the year. Something might have happened to your business and your budget's been reduced or the timeline has been reduced. Staff might go off sick. Something might happen that's going to throw that plan out of all sync with what you thought was going to happen. But please be assured that it's not just you. I've unfortunately seen a lot of customers get stuck on a migration project because, again, something changes halfway through it, because it's one of these projects, like I said, that rarely gets completed in a weekend. If you're a really small company, that might be the way forward. But if you're a larger company, then chances are things are going to change at some point along the way. Now, to summarise, key learnings from what I've spoke about today, think about what your success is actually going to look like. Make sure you have a measure for success, whether that's be moving out of your data centre by the end of the lease. So if the lease runs out in July 2021, you know, if you're out of that data center before the end of that lease, that's a successful migration and everybody in your organization is happy. Or is it looking at getting away from all your on-prem hardware before the warranty runs out? Make sure you define that success so that you know the goal you're aiming for when things don't go the way that you've planned, or make sure that your leadership team know what you're striving towards and what will be a successful migration for them as well. Make sure you're involving the business at every step. Like I said, it's not just about technology, and we can get focused on that technology sometimes, but make sure you're involving the rest of the business and keeping everybody involved and thinking about the people that this migration is going to impact as well. Think about scripting and automating where you can. These migration projects are long. There are often times where you're going to have to work maybe at 2 a.m. in the morning. So make sure you're scripting things that can help you on that process. Make sure you're learning these things so that you're not having that human element and you accidentally press the wrong button at 2 a.m. and things go completely wrong, and you know, you're working all hours trying to fix it. So script and automate where you can. It will help avoid human error, and it will hopefully speed up some of the time that you're doing these migrations as well. Think about the tooling that you're picking. There's a lot of tools out there, but again, try the ones that you can and try and figure out what you actually need from a tool before doubling down and actually buying that tool if you need to buy it. And last but not least, track and optimize your spend. Moving to the cloud is a completely different operating model. So again, make sure you're investing the time and energy into optimizing your cost and spend across your platform as well. It can really help you manage your budget as well, and think about your designs as well. Now, if you're looking for some resources to further read about, the Cloud Adoption Framework is a great place to start. It has a plethora of information open to you, whether you're looking to migrate your existing workloads, maybe you're a new startup that's looking to use the cloud for your environment, then there's lots of different ways you can use the Cloud Adoption Framework. It also has great things like naming conventions, so it can help you guide you along picking the right naming convention for your resources. Things like that are built into the Cloud Adoption Framework, and it's definitely a resource you should bookmark and have a look at along your journey. The Azure Architecture Center, which is not easy to say, is also a great resource for having a look at some of the design patterns that can help you understand how to architect your workloads, thinking about things like, you know, where you can tag on log analytics, how you use Azure Storage to archive some of your storage in a cheaper way than having it reside on a server on a managed disk. There's different designs up there. So again, another resource to check in on and have a look at every now and again. And the last resource is our Azure Migration Center. It has a whole bunch of the information that I've just talked about today, shows you some of the tools that are available, talks about Azure Migrate more in detail. And there are also some links around the partners. We have some Microsoft partners who are dedicated completely to migration, so you can leverage their skill set and their knowledge and the mistakes they've seen other customers make and hopefully avoid them within your environment. So it's another great resource to bookmark if you're on a migration project. Now, thank you so much for letting me talk today. If you want to check out some more resources or click on some of the links that I talked about, they're on screen, and my contact details as well. Hopefully there's some questions and you feel that I can field right now, but if you don't feel comfortable asking now, please reach out to me on Twitter or on my blog and we can have a chat individually. But thank you for tuning in and letting me speak today.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's an honor to have you on the show. One question from my side is, do you have a good example on where people should start? Like, should they start small with that migration, or should they pick a certain area, which is often a good area to start?
I think you should look at discovering your entire environment, make sure you understand all the dependencies, but start maybe on some of the things that are like your IT workloads. So if you have, you know, a server with all your intranet sites, or, you know, it shows you your your cafeteria menu for the day, that's probably a workload you can start to learn at, because hopefully no one's going to be shouting at you too much if you move that or do it wrong and they can't see that menu. Again, like I say, don't start with your payroll application. because if you get it wrong, folk are definitely going to shout. Everybody starts differently, like everybody has different migration triggers that are moving them. Some people will move the workloads that reside on the hardware that's really failing. You know, you've got a failed disk and you can't get the parts. So I don't think there's any common ones. I think just the guidance is always to start with the ones that are least impactful on your business and then grow up to the bigger ones that are definitely going to impact your business.
Least impactful and least amount of dependencies, so it's easier to do the actual migration.
Yep.
I see another question here. Any tips for evaluating the VM sizes? You really need, based on how apps are performing when they're on-prem, it seems like a great opportunity to write the right source, the size of the resource.
Yep. So tools like Azure Migrate can actually look at that and give you some of the. With Azure Migrate, you can install the dependency application and the kind of monitoring agent on it as well. And if you leave it running for, say, at least 30 days, some people leave it for longer, it will give you a good average of what's happening within your environment. You'll be able to see, you know, is your current resources underutilized? So maybe you've given it like 4 cores and 8 gig of RAM and it's not using all of that. Azure Migrate will suggest, you know, maybe just using 2 cores and 4 gig of RAM. The other thing to remember is it will evaluate kind of the variance of what's happening within your environment. And remember, Azure uses lots of newer hardware, so it's a lot faster. So again, it will give you great insights into how you can size your workloads within Azure. So the other tools that are available, the other third-party tools, will be able to help you do that as well. But Azure Migrate is a great one to have a look at for understanding that right sizing and getting that right size across into Azure and not putting it too big with Azure.
Yeah, and of course, the cloud gives you the power to actually scale on demand. So when you have to buy your hardware, you have to buy it for the highest amount of users that will actually start using it for your Black Friday events and those kind of things. While the cloud gives you that opportunity to change it along the way. Saving on costs. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So first of all, thank you, Sarah, again for speaking at this meetup. Thanks everyone who was watching. Please press the like button if you liked Sarah's talk. We'll be back Monday. We have Isaac from. He will talk about GitHub in combination with GitHub Actions and .NET applications to Azure. So that's going to be nice as well. So tune in Monday evening, 8 o'clock Central European time. So yeah, you have to do the calculations yourself from where you are. Hopefully to see everyone again then, and well, talk to you later.